Tonight, an old friend returns in Action Comics, and he is such a good boy. Dial H shows us that 0 plus 0 can actually equal 1, and GI Combat has a haunted tank. Nothing more needs to be said. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 57 of the Not So New 52. I am your host, and right out the way I got to get a little bit of a personal news out the gate. This is going to be a bit of a shorter episode, all things considered, not just because there are only 12 comics to talk about, but because this week I am having some massive dental work done. In fact, I've already had some done here, so please forgive me if at some point throughout this podcast you hear a little bit of a lisp. I am genuinely doing my best with a new set of teeth, but there is quite a bit of substantial pain, so I'm just going to soldier on as best I can. You may be asking, why do the episode at all if talking genuinely hurts? And the answer is, I committed to this and I'm not going to stop unless I'm actually dead. So, there's that. Anyway, let's talk about the new comics coming out this week. We have, as I said, 12 comics. We have the first of the number 13 issues, and those are the number 13s of Batwing, Detective Comics, Action Comics, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Stormwatch, Animal Man, and Swamp Thing. Additionally, we have the number 5 issues of Earth 2, World's Finest, GI Combat, and Dial H. Some things of note, particularly for this week, as you will see at the very first comics we read, we have event season. Dear Lord, so many events are going on. So this week we have the first official parts of Rot World happening in both Animal Man and Swamp Thing. They have concurrent storylines, both dealing with the same event. And we have part 1 officially of Rise of the Third Army in Green Lantern. Moving forward into future weeks later this month, we have events literally every week. They do not stop from now until like next year. So get used to that. But enough talk, let's go ahead and jump into our first event of Rot World. Animal Man number 13, written by Geoff Lemire, art by Timothy Green II and Steve Pugh. This is part 1 of half of Rot World. This is the Red Kingdom side of things, dealing with the the red stuff. And we, of course, left off in Swamp Thing number 12, the end of the prologue to Rot World, with Anton Arcane basically taking Animal Man and Swamp Thing out of the game for a whole year while the Rot just ran wild. So we pick up with Buddy. He's coming out of the sky. Somehow the Rot is up there, and when he comes to, the world is in just utter disrepair, and he recognizes it as Earth. And as he's looking around trying to figure out, like, what in the hell just happened here, he looks up and sees a giant bird-like figure coming out of the sky. And it turns out it's Zombie Hawkman. So, briefly, he's like, Hawkman, wait, it's me, I'm on your side. And then he realizes it's Zombie Hawkman, and he's like, okay, well, I guess it's time to fight then. So he goes and attacks Zombie Hawkman, but of course, the Rot, he's able to just, absorb the blows, regenerate, no big deal. So at that point, reinforcements arrive in the form of Steel from Superman, Beast Boy, and Black Orchid, who I believe the only appearance has been Justice League Dark, and she's a shapeshifter, whereas the other two are pretty obvious. So they come in, and they attack Hawkman, and basically take him out entirely, and they lay out, it's just like, hi, I'm Steel, this is Black Orchid, this is Beast Boy, who are you? And he's like, I'm Buddy Baker, Animal Man. They're like, okay, but seriously, who are you? It's like, no, I'm Buddy Baker, Animal Man. He's like, okay, you're going to have to come with us, sir. Let's go. So then we cut back to a year before because Cliff just disappeared with his grandmother not noticing, when Ellen and Maxine get back to the hotel room. They're like, okay, well, Maxine, I know I told you not to use your powers, but can you tell us where Cliff is? And she's like, yeah, I can feel him, but he's like close to one of those rotten guys. And so Ellen throws on her shirt and is like, all right, everyone back in the van, we're going to find my son. So back to now, because now is technically a year in the future, it will get confusing every time I say it. So cut to Rot World. Basically, they're just trying to confirm. They're like, okay, but like you're actually Buddy Baker, and he's like, yes. Why don't you guys trust me? It's like, it's because you disappeared like a year ago, and he's like, a year? What? We were in there for like an hour. And it's like, yeah, I don't know what happened, but basically, he goes through the whole thing of the rot showed up and it just started taking over. No matter what, all of the heroes just fell to it. Nobody was able to survive. And once the more super powerful ones got taken over by the rot, it was just all the easier for it to dominate the rest of the world. And they even say that like villains were becoming heroes as long as the only ones to survive were the people who had a connection to either the red or the green. So like Beast Boy and apparently Black Orchid have a connection to the red, whereas people like Poison Ivy have a connection to the green. And so they were able to survive past everybody else, and they're the only ones who are left. Also, Steel's able to survive because despite the fact he was a man, he downloaded his consciousness into an AI, like full robot, and now he's just a robot. So, yeah. But anyway, they're like, okay, well, we're on our way to the red. And when they get there, we see that it's this little beacon of life in just the arid desert of, I think, Louisiana? I could be wrong. So then we go to Before Rot World, and they're driving down the road, and all of a sudden they see Cliff in the middle of the road just standing there. And they slam on the brakes to get out. They're like, Cliff, are you okay? And he snaps his neck around all unnaturally and freaks out his mom. And we see that he's already been infected with the rot. So again, back to Rot World. Buddy's like, oh, hey, if we're in the red, I need to talk to the totems. Like, they'll understand what to do. And every Beast Boy and all of them are like, yeah, the totems are the red. Like, when they saw the rot was going to take over, they basically turned their bodies into a living, like, place that we could be. They're not sentient anymore, but they protect us. So, yeah, they're gone. The totems are gone. But we do see that some people in the red managed to make it here, including the shepherd from all those issues ago. And he's like, oh, Buddy Baker, so nice to see you again. He's like, yeah, cool. Hey, shepherd, do you know where Maxine is? Or like my wife or my son? And he's like, oh, they're dead. I'm sorry I have to be the one that breaks it to you. But then John Constantine, who apparently also survived, steps up and he's like, yeah, no, this is all your fault, Buddy Baker. Everything here is all your fault. And he's like, that wasn't my fault. I wasn't even here. He's like, exactly. Maxine, she had the power to do something, but she wasn't ready. You were supposed to be there. You were supposed to protect her. And he's getting all up on his case for that. So then we cut one last time to Before Rot World. Cliff is going after his mom, and eventually, like, she gets through to him and says, like, no, Cliff, please stop. And he's like, stop. Mom, I'm so scared. Please help me. And Ellen runs up, gives her a hug. But then he spits out this, as best I can tell you, it just looks like a glob of flesh. And it hits the ground and immediately latches onto Ellen and goes down her throat. And we see that now both of them have been infected with the rot. Oopsie. So yeah, no, it's a lot to take on all at once. I mean, we already had us pre-established in Swamp Thing 12 that this was set a year afterwards, but they really spent a lot of time in this re-establishing, like, what? We've been gone a year? Like, yeah, clearly. I guess that technically because it was in the prologue, they just wanted to make sure the people who were jumping in at part 1, like, got it, but I don't know, it seemed a bit unnecessary for me. Art-wise, great. I don't have a problem with it. It does feel like we are getting the backstory to how the rot spread via the flashbacks or the current day, depending on how you want to call it. And then, getting a feel for what the world is in Rot World. So overall, it's setting up very well. It's just setting up the stakes of, yeah, no, everyone's gone except for like who you see on the page. That's it. So big stakes, big rewards. Overall, I'd say this is an 8. It's a very strong start. I definitely am looking forward to the rest of Rot World. Obviously, Swamp Thing has a concurrent storyline focusing on the green, and yeah, I'm very interested to see how Rot World turns out. Swamp Thing number 13, written by Scott Snyder, art by Yanick Paquette. This is part 1 of Rot World, The Green Kingdom, concurrent storyline of Rot World going on with Animal Man, The Red Kingdom. And as we picked up at the end of the prologue, they've been trapped in Rot World for what felt like an hour. Turns out it was a year in the real world, and now they're in Rot World. I mean, they were stuck in the rot, the gray. Anton Arcade. Anyway, so Swamp Thing plummets back down to Earth. It's a year later, and he's met by Poison Ivy and Deadman, who immediately step up. Like, Poison Ivy's got a sword to his throat, saying like, "All right, who are you?" He's like, "I'm Alec Holland. I'm Swamp Thing. You're Poison Ivy. You're Deadman." And then it's like, yeah, okay. This is clearly a trick because Alec Holland disappeared a year ago, so we're just gonna kill you because you're probably some sort of like rogue agent or something like that. And he's like, "What? No, I'm me." And Deadman's like, "Well, hold on. All right, I can check." And so he jumps into Swamp Thing's body, confirms that it is Alec Holland. And Poison Ivy's still very skeptical. She's like, "Nah, remember when Jason Woodrue, he got possessed by the rot and he fooled us." And it's like, "Yeah, well, that's a dude inside of a plant thing. So that's Alec Holland." So Swamp Thing's tired of hearing their squabbling back and forth. He puts a Poison Ivy into some vines and is just like, "Okay, here's the thing. I don't care what you think, but I got to find the Parliament of Trees." And she's like, "Oh, well, that's all. They're right here." And we turn around and we see this giant, like, trunk of a tree, a stalk pretty much, going all the way up into the clouds. And it's like, they're right up there. And meanwhile, they're in the middle of a desert. So Swamp Thing's like, no, I left the Parliament growing in a Louisiana swamp." And Poison Ivy's like, "Yeah, this desert is Louisiana now. That's all that's left of the green, buddy." So then we cut to Abby Arcane, and she is on a plane flying to the Carpathian Mountains, which, forgive my geography, I don't know where that is, but she apparently spent a lot of time there growing up because there's not a lot of life there. It's pretty stark and barren, but she goes on about this whole thing of how death is what makes life worth it. So it's, it's the balance. It makes it equal. You got to have death to appreciate life. But as she's on this plane trying to get to, I guess, some sort of central point to the rot, the rot is actually on the plane itself in the form of this black goop. And there is a grandfather and granddaughter on this plane. And the grandfather's immediately infected by the rot, which then transforms him into this giant, mindless-looking beast that infects his granddaughter. And before you know it, the entire plane's infected. So Swamp Thing, Deadman, and Poison Ivy are making their way up the stalk. And basically, they're trying to think, like, they're blaming Swamp Thing for everything that happened because he disappeared for a year. And then Swamp Thing goes into the whole thing of like, "No, we were trapped there. We were ready to fight the rot. We weren't running away from it. Like, we were going in to fight it, and then we just missed out on a whole year somehow. But regardless, if I can just go and talk to the Parliament, we can get all the green together." And she's like, "No, you don't understand. Like, this is it. This is all the green. There is nothing more than this." And he's like, "Oh, okay, well, that sucks." But anyway, he gets up there, and he sees the Parliament up on a cliff top, and so he sprouts his wings and gets up there and just basically communes with them. He goes into the green, and they basically are saying like, "Hey, Alec, what's up, man? You came back. That's cool." And it's like, "Hey, Parliament, so this is a messed up future." He's like, "Future? No, this is now, Alec. This isn't like some weird thing where you've been shunted through. Like, we went through time. This is now for us." And he's like, "Okay, well, maybe we can find some way to go back and, like, fix things." And he's like, "No. Like, this happened. This is set in stone. Like, this happened and we can't change it. This sucks, Alec. I don't think you quite understand." And he's like, "Okay, sorry. What happened to Abby? Maybe she could help. What happened to Abby?" And they all go real quiet for a second. And Poison Ivy shakes Swamp Thing out of it. And he's like, "Hey, we're under attack. Like, usually they just have a bunch of tiny little, like, drones biting at the base of the stalk. Like, it's nothing to worry about. But this time they sent some high-powered superhero people. Probably because you're here. Once again, ruining things. So come on, you're going to come help us." And we see that Poison Ivy is able to make some, like, almost Swamp Things. Like, they're not actual Swamp Things, but they look a lot like them. And use them as, like, foot soldiers to take on these attacking hordes. And we see that the superheroes that are actually attacking are the Teen Titans, all ratified. So it's a big drag-out battle, and the Parliament of Trees is narrating the fight, saying like, "Oh, do you think we should have told him what happened to Abby?" And it's like, well, yes, and we will when he gets back from this fight. Or maybe not. Like, it's a big thing to tell him. And we get the reveal of what happened on the plane, that all of the rot-infected passengers come after her, and she's like, guys, everyone stay in your seats. We got to wait until the captain turns off the light. And then we see the captains are infected as well. And she's like, wait a minute, then who's flying the plane? And we see the plane is quite literally plummeting into the mountains as it's happening. And it, according to the Parliament in Rotworld 1 year later, she died. Like, that's it. She hit the mountains, exploded, and she died. The end. And that's also the end of the issue. I like it. I really do think it's a solid startup. It sets some, some bitterness between Poison Ivy and Swamp Thing, despite the fact they're on the same side. Because, she was a villain. She didn't want to do any of this stuff. But at the same time, like, all of her green is gone. She has every right to be upset. So, yeah, overall, I really do. I enjoy how Rotworld is starting. Right now, it is just setting up the pieces. It's saying, okay, here's who's infected, here's who's not. And Animal Man's doing the same thing. It's just the setup time right now, but I really do like the starkness of the world and how it isn't a thing where people, like, there's no one who thinks that they can time travel back. They just think, like, no, this is it. Like, this is the world now. You're not here to save the world. Like, we lost. This is it now. So I like that way that they're dealing with that. Overall, though, this issue is probably an 8. It's very good. It's just still setting up the pieces, so there's still a little bit missing there. But overall, very good issue. Looking forward to the rest of Rotworld. Green Lantern number 13, written by Geoff Johns, art by Doug Mahnke. This is the technical start of the Rise of the Third Army story. I mean, there was a prologue few issues before this, but it seems that every Green Lantern book is going to be telling its own independent story. So this is the first part of Green Lantern's Rise of the Third Army tale, or whatever you want to call it. So we open up DC super early in the morning, and President Obama is getting a briefing on who all the Green Lanterns are from Amanda Waller. And we get that, hey, we know Hal Jordan, we know Guy Gardner, we know John Stewart, we really like him, he's a cool one, and we don't know this fourth one, but we think he's either an artist or a video game nut. And then Amanda has to lay out the fact of, now there's another one, because the Ring went and broke some guy out of Gitmo, and his name is Simon Baz, and we think he's a terrorist. And Obama's like, I thought that the Rings picked good people. And Amanda's like, I don't know. We don't have any oversight with them. We have no idea how they pick things. But regardless, we tracked him heading north. We think he was heading back to the United States. But outside of that, no idea where he is. And Obama's like, all right, well, call the Justice League, because clearly we are outclassed if this Green Lantern is an actual terrorist. So call in the Justice League. So then we cut to the Florida Keys. Simon, he's unconscious. He's having a little flashback to the night that his brother-in-law and him were doing some illegal street racing. Supposedly the one that ends up with Nazir, his brother-in-law, getting into a medical incident. And when he comes to his ring, puts him in a Green Lantern suit, and then plays back a message that is riddled with errors from both Hal and Sinestro. And basically they're dueling like monologues over each other, but they all basically come to the same thing of, don't trust anybody, especially not the Guardians. The Guardians are going to try to kill you. You might be able to trust Arkillo, you might be able to trust Carol Ferris, but besides that, stop the Guardians. That is your primary objective. So then the message stops, and the ring, like the suit, disappears off him, and he just goes wandering through the Keys until he comes to a highway. And when he gets there, he sees a cop car coming up, and he's like, oh, geez, all right, Ring, I gotta get out of here. And the Ring, again, gets him into a full suit and zooms him up out of the area. But they cops see the light and call it in. So then we get to Cuba, again, where there was that agent named Fed last issue who was interrogating Simon, but really didn't want to because he's a good guy like that. And he's like, you know what? I think I'm going to retire because I almost broke all of my moral compasses in there. So I'm just gonna go. But then he gets a call from Amanda Waller saying, hey, we've got him. We've got a track on him. We got a call from some guys down in Florida. If we get him, we're going to use the big guns to like stun him, but we're going to need you to talk him down. So get your ass up here. And we see that he's made his way back home to Dearborn, Michigan. And his sister's being dropped off by their father at her work, which is apparently... It's literally a store that says Secretary of State, which I assume means it's like a government thing, but I don't think it's a storefront that actually says Secretary of State. So anyway, he's just like, yay, look, like ever since your brother got arrested on terrorism charges, our entire family has been looked down on because we're all just as guilty as he is. And his sister Sierra's like, yeah, well, he's not guilty, so no big deal. He'll get back one day. This will all just be a memory at some point. So makes her way inside. And as soon as she does, she's immediately being stared down by like all the people inside. She's called to her boss's office, and the boss is like, hey, while this is ongoing, people are a little bit scared for their safety. So how about you head home until I give you a call, okay? Get out. So she's upset by that, obviously. But then Simon comes up to her and gets her in an alleyway, and she's like, hey, look, did you get my message? I didn't do it on purpose. Like, I genuinely didn't know there was a bomb in the back of that van. And tries to explain a little bit of the ring and whatnot. And basically, she doesn't care about the ring. She's just like, everything you're doing is making things worse. You are keeping yourself distant from this family, and now even when you're doing this stuff, because you're distant, like, you think it helps, but it doesn't. Like, we're still just as caught up in this as you are. Like, I don't... He's taking all the blame that Sierra's husband, I guess, died because of him. Again, they haven't directly said that. It looks like he's at least in a coma. But regardless, she's just like, no, look, it has nothing to do with that. Like, you need to be the one that makes this okay. And you need to be around us, okay? Like, you keeping your... Like, it's not helping anything. And he's like, okay, look, just meet me up where we used to hang out as kids, up on the roof of this building, okay? You have your job at the Secretary of State. You can help me here. We can get some strings pulled. So she's like, fine, whatever, I'll help. So at this point, we get the little bit that ties into Rise of the Third Army. Some truck drivers are driving down the road. They're talking about, on the news, there's an explosion at Gitmo and whatnot. And he's like, oh, that's crazy. There's a lot of crazy stuff in the world. And then all of a sudden, the weird alien-looking things, the Third Army guys, pop out of the bushes. They bust through the windshield of the truck and assimilate them into the Third Army. And they register that there is another Green Lantern energy on the planet, so they have to go out and get it in the name of the Guardians. So then that night, Simon heads up to the roof where he and his sister would like hide out whenever they were getting attacked or whatever. And apparently there's a security camera up here, so Simon has the ring put on a mask, and now we get his full outfit that we've seen him in on the cover. And it turns out that while he's waiting for his sister, he's not alone, because the Justice League shows up and attacks him and says, like, you're in a lot of trouble, dude. So yeah, next issue, Simon versus the Justice League. I'm interested. I'm interested in Simon's story, but this doesn't feel like part one of the Third Army stuff. This feels unrelated, and they're just like building up the Third Army stuff in the background. I'm sure eventually we'll tie it all together, but for right now, it does just feel completely separate. Like, this doesn't feel appropriate to have the Third Army like event logo on it, if that makes any sense. This just feels like a different story that is so loosely tied in, but it's like part one of the Green Lanterns part. So if I take it on just the story itself, it's a fine story. It's setting things up still. It's introducing us to more characters in Simon's life. It's getting through like what he knows, what he doesn't know, what he believes. It's just set up. It's not bad. But in terms of this is part one of like the event, if you ignore the prologue stuff, like it's kind of weak. So overall, I'm going to say this one's like a 6.5. Again, I don't dislike the characters. I don't dislike any of that. But it's just not part one of the event worthy. So I'm going to dock a point or two off of it because of that. If it was just standing on its own, it'd probably like at least a 7, probably 7.5. But it's 6.5 because being the start of an event comes with some certain connotations, and this just didn't live up to that. Detective Comics number 13, written by John Layman, art by Jason Fabok. This is a new arc focusing on the Penguin, ostensibly. So we open up with flashbacks to Bruce Wayne donating a bunch of money to orthodontic and orthopedic surgeons, and then saying how that's why he doesn't feel bad when he punches criminals in the face, knocking out their teeth, and breaks their legs. And we see that it was just a typical mugging sort of thing. I think it was actually a robbery. And he's standing on the rooftop, and Alfred's talking to him, saying like, hey, yeah, no, good job and all, but you got like a gala, like an opening thing you got to get to. There is a children's hospital or something that's getting a new wing in the name of Martha Wayne. And he's like, yeah, no, I'll be there, Alfred, no big deal, no problem. Although a security alarm just went off across town, so I got to get there. Meanwhile, we see that there's a sniper wearing a demon mask who's got a clear shot on Batman, and he's like, hey, Control, should I take this shot? And they're like, no, Batman's not the target. We only focus on our target. And who's that target? Well, we find out 3 days earlier, Penguin put out a hit on Bruce Wayne because he doesn't like that Bruce is getting this children's hospital wing after his mother. Penguin wants it for himself, so he put a hit out by someone named the Ghost Dragons to kill Bruce Wayne. And the Ghost Dragons are like, yeah, no, totally, but just remember, we do not fail. And he's like, all right, whatever, sure. And then we see Penguin's new crony, like side guy. His name is Ogilvy. And Penguin's just like, hey, Ogilvy, make sure that you get the Wayne Manors some flowers. And he's like, oh, yes, sir, right away, sir. So that evening comes around, and everyone is like, where's Bruce Wayne? Penguin's like, he's not here yet. There's no sign of him outside Wayne Manor. There's the Ghost Dragon is currently sitting as a sniper position right outside the gala, ready to take the shot, but no one's able to see him anywhere. Meanwhile, Batman makes his way over to the next robbery, but he's like, something's not right here. Hey, Nightwing? He's like, yeah, you gotta, there's a thing on the opposite side of town to where I'm going. Go there and stop a robbery that's about to happen. And he's like, okay. And so Nightwing goes off and does that. Batman takes care of yet another robbery going on. And he threatens the one guy. He just holds him up and he's like, okay, here's what I know. You're a too-big criminal and you're not that smart. You broke into this place because this is a very specific security system that somebody lets you know all the special stuff to, but they didn't tell you about the secret alarm. So who are you? And he's like, oh, there was just some drunk guy. He was rambling about the system, and we just thought it was an easy score. And he's like, crap, all right. So then we cut back to Penguin, who's looking at the Martha Wayne Children's Center sign, and he's like, Ogilvy, I want to be loved. Not like romantically, but I want the people of Gotham to like me. So I'm going to start being likable. And Ogilvy's like, okay, sure, whatever. So Batman then calls up Nightwing, and he's like, hey, Nightwing, did you take care of that break-in? And he's like, yeah, no, they literally hadn't even started yet. How did you know that was going to happen? And Batman goes through this whole spiel about how all the things that have been targeted tonight have all had a specific security system, and they have bypass codes and blah, blah, blah. And Nightwing even says blah, blah, blah. So at that point, he's like, okay, here's the deal, Nightwing. Someone has been trying to string together as many robberies, all happening simultaneously, in order to keep Batman busy on opposite sides of town. I'm going to need you to fill in slightly and take care of those, because I need to go do a gala thing. And Nightwing's like, yeah, sure, okay, whatever. So Batman goes to the gala, but before he gets there, he flies over the gala, and he sees the sniper on the roof of the Ghost Dragon, and he's like, oh, well, I can take care of this easy. Cut back to Penguin, who's threatening the head of the hospital, I guess, and he's just like, here's the deal. Bruce Wayne may have given you a sizable donation. I'm going to double it and also threaten your life. So instead, you're going to name the wing after my deceased mother. And he's like, okay, but like the announcement isn't even for a few weeks. And he's like, I don't care. You're going to do it tonight. So that's the part I didn't understand was what are all these people gathered for if the announcement isn't for a few weeks? I genuinely don't get it. Anyway, so Batman's fighting the Ghost Dragon, and he's like, oh, this guy's good. Not as good as me. Punches him in the face, knocks him out, and sees his target was Bruce Wayne. And he's like, okay, all right, this is all clicking into place now, why they didn't want Batman around here. Regardless, I'm here. And as he walks in as Bruce Wayne, he sees Cobblepot up on stage, shaking hands with the guy who runs the hospital, saying like, oh, thank you for our new wing, everybody. And Bruce is like, no. And then there's also the Ghost Dragon. He was only knocked out, so he gets back up. He comes in, he sees Bruce Wayne, and he's like, this ain't gonna stand. So then we go up to Cobblepot, and everyone's like, oh, Cobblepot, you're such a nice guy, so great, so cool. And then he tells Ogilvy, like, hey, you can take off the hit on Bruce Wayne. Like, if he was killed now, it would actually only cause more problems. And Ogilvy's like, remember how they said that they never fail? That means they also don't ever quit. And then we see the final page reveal is the Ghost Dragon with a flaming sword coming in and attacking Bruce Wayne. So, yeah. It's good. I'm not against it. I should say that this is a new run, and as such, the backup stories in this actually relate a little bit more to the story being told. That being said, I am still going to save them for 5th weeks, but if need be for the sake of storytelling, I will include it in the story itself. This week it was separate enough that I'm just going to wait until the end of the month. But yeah, no, this is a good start. I really do think that, okay, we've got a Penguin story here, and it's just going to be the thing where it's like, okay, he's going to change his public image. He's going to do that. And I think we've seen that a few times, but it's decent. It's a good enough story being told to it. I really do appreciate how they took it step by step. They were like, okay, Batman is literally doing his detective thing again. He is walking us through the process and saying, this is how I deduce this, which leads to this and that. Like, it's a nice forward and back. I really do enjoy that. So overall, good start to the run. Jason Fabok's art, fantastic. Just great the whole way through. Very well detailed, very expressioned. I can't find any fault in that at all. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is an 8. Really do enjoy it. Looking forward to the rest of the arc and what they do with Penguin. Batwing number 13, written by Judd, Winick, art by Marcus Toe. This is the start of a new arc, seemingly focusing on a cult of Father Lost. New characters. So we open up on this cult, and they have a whole bunch of hostages and whatever else. They are 34 miles out of the city, and they are called the Finders. And they're going after they are serving someone named Father Lost. And apparently there's a goddess who demands blood, and the goddess will then give power to Father Lost, whoever that may be. He's not actually around. So they slit the throats of these people, and then there's a few survivors left, but not a lot. But then this woman busts in, not wearing any sort of real costume, just a headscarf, and says like, nope, all this is ending now. And they're like, oh, you cannot stop Father Lost. We have the power. And then this woman starts up she has some sort of electrical sword power. Like, she has swords that are just imbued with electricity that she also just generates. So, I don't know. Regardless, she starts fighting with them. But before the fight can get to be too much, the police bust in and say, all right, everyone, drop your weapons. And she's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm on your side. They're the bad guys. And he's like, yeah, we are the bad guys. Let's do this. So then the police open fire, and the police don't open fire. The cult all commit suicide right in front of the police, save for one guy who's like just standing there saying, all right, fine, take me in. So then we get later with this girl. Her name is Dawn, by the way. And she's at a grave saying like, the victims were fine with the police and everyone was dead except for the one guy. the Finders never talk to anybody, so they must be planning something. And I'm going to find out what. I'm going to stop these rituals, and I'm going to save these people. And she's at the grave of someone named Renee, who I believe was the name of the woman who took in David at the children's home. So maybe there's some relation there. Regardless, we cut to Batwing, who's currently chasing down a jet that's about to crash into the city of Tanasha, and the guy's not responding. The guy inside's not responding. David's in touch with the military, who's like, hey, have you scrambled the jets? And it's like, yeah, they're 3 or 4 minutes away. They'll get there. It's like, no, they won't. They're going to crash down into the city. So Batwing looks inside and sees that the pilot is General Abraham Jordan, and he's ranting and raving like, oh, we will serve her. We will give her gifts. She will reward us. It has begun. And he realizes, like, all right, jets aren't going to make it. I can't stop it from, like, going down, but I can turn it. So he grabs it and he turns it slightly so that it lands outside the city. And he's unable to save General Jordan, but the city is at least saved. Cut to later at the police department. We see images from the Finders cult attack, the ritual murder, and it's Kia is looking at them. David is talking to her and basically saying like, hey, we got one guy there. Has he said anything at all? And it's like, no, he hasn't been saying anything. They've had like 5 rituals that we've managed to come across in 2 weeks, and we can't get anything out of them. And then a man stops by Kia's desk and drops off basically her bribe for the week. Part of the money that the officers took off of all the dead people before like coroners arrived, and is saying like, all right, here's your cut. And David's like, you shouldn't be taking that. And she's like, I need my officers to trust me. Like, I don't want to take this money either, but like, if I don't, they won't trust me. The same way that they don't trust you. And at this point, she's getting emotional, and David's like, all right, something bigger going on here. And it turns out that her niece has been missing for 2 days, and she's worried that she might be part of one of these rituals next. And David's like, don't worry, we'll find her. And if like, haven't heard anything by the end of the night, then file the report with the police. And she's like, I will, but I'm not asking for special treatment just because I'm on the police force. So then David decides to intervene. He gets into his Batwing armor, and he seemingly teleports the guy who isn't talking out of his cell into the middle of a field. But the guy's like, now wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. And as he reaches forward to Batwing, who's like telling him, like, tell me what you did to the general. Tell me what you did. He just reaches forward and shows that all of this is actually just a hologram. Like, none of it's actually true. He's actually still in the cell. And David's just standing in front of him in his normal civilian outfit. And so the guy reaches forward, grabs a hold of David's head, and starts seemingly hypnotizing him. And as David's able to see, there's this figure called Father Lost that is there, and he's like, yes, I will provide, I will give you power, we are all children of Father Lost. But then Kia breaks in, knocks the guy out, and frees David from the hypnotism, and he's like, okay, I know what their plans are, like, he let me in that much, I was able to see, and it's gonna be nightmare. So elsewhere, the Finders have regrouped, they've got a new ritual sacrifice here, and they're like, all right, everyone, blood time. Everyone ready for blood. And we see that in the crowd is Dawn, and she's like, all right, you guys want blood? I'll give it to you. So she breaks out, starts fighting all the Finders, trying to free the civilians. She cuts a few of them loose, tells them to cut the rest of them loose and then run. But then the Finders get the upper hand on Dawn, and she's just like, oh no, everyone, please just run, get out of here. And then the ceiling crashes in, and who's there but Nightwing, saying like, nope, nobody needs to run. Batwing's here. I like it. It's good. I don't think I'm quite getting the full scope of it yet. Like, this does definitely feel like a tease a little bit sort of intro rather than a we're going to give you everything you need. Sure, we got the Finders. Sure, we got Father Lost. And sure, we got Hypnotism. But it does feel like there's something larger at play here, especially with their devotion to this goddess. Yeah, I mean, I don't fault it. I think it's definitely setting up the stuff it needs to well enough. I don't know. Maybe it's just not intriguing me that much. It does seem very lackluster in terms of like, okay, we had this whole big thing before about like the kingdom and these heroes and this guy who's going around killing heroes and da-da-da. And this one's just, there's a cult sacrificing people. And they do have powers, don't get me wrong, but it just does seem a little bit like, okay, I guess. Like, I don't know, it doesn't feel as strong foot forward as I would have liked. So overall, this one's like a 6.5. It's good. I have no faults against that or the art even. Like, it's fine throughout, but it does just feel kind of like a okay, whatever sort of issue, you know? Action Comics number 13, written by Grant Morrison, art by Travel Foreman. This is a Halloween special, quote unquote. We open up on Krypton 20 years before its destruction, and basically it is the first time that they use the Phantom Zone. There was a criminal named Zadu who did some crazy forbidden experiments with suspended animation and apparently unleashed a horror called the Living Death on Krypton. And so the entire council's like, yeah, no, we would put you in like suspended animation as we have our other horrible criminals, but you've literally made us not want to do that with your horrible crimes. So we've made something new. And Jor-El steps up, has the Phantom Zone projection, and throws him in there. And he's of course freaking out. He's like, I can't see anything, I can't hear anything, I can't feel anything. I'm just stuck with my thoughts for 20 years. So as it turns out that 20 years later, was literally the day that Krypton exploded. He was supposed to come out for parole, and he didn't, because Krypton exploded. So at this point, Superman's got all the Kryptonian tech that, like, was gathered in, I think it was Brainiac's ship, and he gets an alert, like, oh, we've got some crazy tsunamis out in the Pacific, like, something crazy's going on out there. Superman, we need your help. And he's like, I'm on my way. But as he's leaving, he hears something. And he looks around and he doesn't see anything immediately. He's like, what in the... I know I just heard something. And as he makes his way over to this giant mirror-looking thing, he sees this fiery hellscape figure. Like, one part Ragman, one part Hellraiser. So he sees that and then he freaks out for a second. He's like, wait a minute, what the... I know I saw something there. Oh, well, whatever. And he starts to leave. But he makes his way over to the Phantom Zone projector, and he looks inside of it, and he can see that there's this giant crack on the screen, but he also sees paw prints inside, and he's like, what in the heck? What's going on? Wait, there's something behind me. And as he turns around, he sees Zadu is the fiery hellscape figure, and he pushes the Phantom Zone projection button and sends Superman into the Phantom Zone. And immediately he's met with all, people just naming themselves off like, I am Ursa, I am Jaxur, Vac Ox, Akavar, Raskrom. But then there's one voice that rings out just saying, kneel before me, kneel before. And he's like, oh crap, I'm in the Phantom Zone. So Zadu walks around, and he's like, oh my god, I'm out, this is fantastic. And all the like voices from the Phantom Zone are still calling him, and he's like, oh yeah, I said I would save you, wouldn't I? Oops. So then he walks past the bottle city of Kandor, and Kandor's like, he's like, oh, hey, Kandor, you're suspended animation. That's my deal. I'm going to take your technology and use it to torture you. That's going to be great. But first, I want to go out and experience the world a little bit. So he sees all like the news stuff that Superman uses in the Fortress to keep up. And he's like, okay, all right, I'm seeing a whole world out there. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty frail. I think I could break it. Let's go ahead and give that a shot. But then he sees a statue of Jor-El in the fortress, and he just melts it with his heat vision. He's like, Zadu's alive, baby. So back in the Phantom Zone, he's being attacked by all these spirits, and he's like, okay, all right, I can't see, feel, or hear anything, but I know I'm being attacked. I got to focus on like a memory of something. And he remembers... Crypto. He remembers his dog from when he was just a itty-bitty little baby, which I think was an earlier story in this. And he lets out a whistle, and Crypto shows up and starts attacking all the Phantoms that are attacking him. And he gets goggles off of one of the Phantoms, which allows him to see the Phantom Zone, which I don't get how that's a thing at all. But regardless, he does. And he sees Crypto attacking one of the guys, and he's like, oh, hey, there's a dude literally being crucified over there. I'm going to go get him down. So he takes him down. The guy's like, oh, I'm just a stranger in this phantom zone. A phantom stranger, if you will. And yes, it is him. So then Phantom Stranger talks to him and says, like, yeah, no, here's the thing. Phantom Zone, everyone's trapped here. However, there is a way to get out, but it's only good enough. Like, you're the only one who could possibly do it. And also, only you are allowed out. And he's like, okay, all right, I guess we could do that. But I also really want to take my dog. My dog is here. And Phantom Stranger's like, no, you can't take your... Did you not listen to me? You alone are able to leave. And he's like, okay, but I am definitely going to take my dog. I promise that. And so Phantom Stranger gets like his cloak and his hat back on. He's like, yeah, no, I got my own stuff going on. Don't worry about me. But you have to go and protect the world, Superman. Like, you're needed out there. So Zadu starts to leave the fortress. And then all of a sudden he's pulled back by this like irresistible force. Like, he's literally, you see his cape dragging behind him or in front of him because he's being yanked back in. And we see that it's a Phantom Zone, like a phantom version of Clark, and he's literally ripping this... The hellscape looking thing was actually an ectosuit that allowed him to live in the real world, at least temporarily. So now Clark puts it on so that he's able to interact just long enough to activate the Phantom Zone projector and let himself back out, like his physical body back out. Phantom Stranger's fighting off all the other spirits who are somehow interacting with the real world as well. I don't get that part. But he presses the button and he gets out. And he looks back through the projector and he sees Crypto just sitting there waiting. And he's like, gotta get my dog. So he uses the cybernetic arm that came with the suit in order to reach through the Phantom Zone projector and yank out Crypto's physical form. And as he gets him out, he's like, oh, Crypto ain't doing so hot. Like, he's freezing cold. So he very quickly bundles him up and takes him out into deep space, pretty much right where the sun is shining the hardest. And Crypto, boom, back to life. And, you know, he licks Superman's face and he's like, oh, who's the best dog in the universe? You are. So that's basically the story. But then we get one little epilogue page of the little impish guy who's been appearing in this entire series. He shows up and he is looking into the Phantom Zone, and he goes up to Zadu and he's like, hey, you want out of here? You want revenge? I got your ticket. Let's go. So, yeah, that's still happening. Any story of Crypto being saved, like, mwah. I love that. That was fantastic. Travel Foreman's art, I originally saw him on Animal Man. I really did like his style. I think if they were going for more of like a horrifying setting, it works here, but it's definitely a lot more reserved than it was in Animal Man. A lot more just normal. I don't want to say house style because it's not, but it's like there were some truly grotesque things in Animal Man, whereas this one, he's playing it a bit safer in terms of how people are represented. Definitely stylized, though. So I like the art. I like the story. Overall, it's good. It does feel a little bit like but honestly, that's Grant Morrison, honestly, where he just shows up and he's like, hey, I got this one story real quick. Doesn't really tie into much of anything. But it's a heartfelt, sort of interesting take on things. I don't understand why Phantom Stranger's here, because we literally have gotten issue 1 of his series, and he was not in the Phantom Zone. He was not being crucified. I don't get why he's there, but hey, whatever. So overall, this issue's probably it's a 7. I want to give it 7.5, but I can't justify it. So it's a 7. It is very good, and I think that we are getting to the actual plot that involves that little impish guy who's going around collecting Superman villains, so can't wait to see how that evolves into. Earth 2, number 5, written by James Robinson, art by Nicola Scott. This just continues right on where we left off with issue 4, and the White House is under attack, so we get a team of paramilitary-looking guys coming in, grabbing the president, who is some unnamed woman at this point, and a random Secret Service agent, and extracting them out before Grundy's death blinds can get to them. And then we get like 2 full pages in World Army Central Command Center, which is just all exposition. And I'm just going to boil it down to, there's a guy named Commander Khan, and he is in charge of everything here. And there are apparently reports of the new wonders coming in, aka Green Lantern and Flash. And they're like, okay, so Grundy is being attacked by them. We have no clue what's really going on, but we're figuring it out. We sent in our guy, the Atom. He is able to grow and also has atomic something or another. And so they hear the report that he came in and crushed Grundy. And they're like, all right, mission accomplished. So now Atom just has to clean up after himself. And then we get back to the fight between Atom and the rest of the team, because he's trying to take Kendra hostage, prisoner, whatever you want to call it. So he bats away Green Lantern, and Flash runs up, kicks him in the face, and he's like, oh, you little crap. So they manage to get Kendra out of his grip. And then they regroup for a second, and they're like, okay, we gotta deal with Atom. He's big and he's tough. Like, we gotta be able to do what we can here. And he gets up, and before he can even do anything, he's like, you guys don't get it. Like, I'm not gonna go down. And then all of a sudden, he's wrapped up by Grundy's vines, and he's like, oh, turns out I didn't kill him, because as Grundy says himself, Grundy has been dead all along. So he wraps Grundy up in these vines to the point where, like, he's unable to breathe, and Grundy absorbs Atom's atomic power. Again, not entirely sure what that means, but regardless, it makes it so that the initial ETA on world death was just under 2 days. Now it's just under 1, because atomic superpowers. So they're like, okay, step 1, let's go in and save the Atom. Meanwhile, Green Lantern comes back and he's like, I'll handle Grundy. So they start battling it out as the other two try to free Atom. Cut back to the command center, and they're like, okay, Commander Khan, here's the deal. We want to nuke DC. You said no, and so we're bringing in a second opinion. You're going to have a advisor who is going to give you good ideas. And he's like, okay, who? Ah, crap. And in walks Terry Sloan, who, of course, they know, more or less, has completely massacred the planet by launching off those multiple bombs into Zero Issue. So everyone's like, oh, it's Terry Sloan, attack him. And he just waves his hand with a magic glove. And, all right, well, can't attack me anymore because their guns are all melted. So let's get down to business. So we see the fight continuing on. Green Lantern has once again pulverized Grundy. He's nothing but a bunch of teeth and skin now. But of course he'll regenerate. They open up the casket that Atom was in, and he managed to shrink down, so he had plenty of air left. He wasn't going to suffocate anytime soon. But Green Lantern comes in, and they start having a plan. And Atom's like, dude, I'm not going to listen to you. I literally outrank you in every regard. And Green Lantern's like, okay, but the only chance we're going to have is if we all work together here, and I need you to listen to my goddamn plan. And Atom's like, well, fine, I'll just listen to your plan, I guess. So the 4 of them, they come up with the plan that Green Lantern is able to commune with the green. He knows he can do this, and he also thinks he can commune with the gray, which is where Grundy comes from. However, in doing so, he needs to meditate, and therefore his body will be vulnerable. So he tells the group, you guys need to protect my body while I go into the gray and convince them to stop this. And they're like, dude, we barely know you. Are you sure you trust us with this? And he's like, yeah, I got a good feeling about this. This is gonna be fine. We'll be fine. So Grundy gets back up. They all start defending his body as he's communing with the gray. And we see him just tumbling in throughout it. And he's like, wow, okay, this place looks crazy. And the gray talks back to him like, yeah, I know, right? Hey, how's it going? We're the gray. And he's like, hey, your dude, Grundy, he's kind of destroying the world. And it's like, well, yeah, we have to destroy the world so we can start a new one. This isn't a thing of we want everyone dead. We are the process of rebirth. That is our purpose. We are to take away the weakness so that strong things may grow. And as we see it, humanity is on its last legs here. And it's like, no, humanity's not on its last legs. We're doing fine. We're thriving. Everything's great. You just got to give us more time. And he's like, the Gray is like, nah, I don't think it's gonna work. He's like, all right, please. And he's like, even if we wanted to stop Grundy now, he's literally too strong to stop. Like, he is making up majority of our power force right now. And it's like, okay, so then what would you have us do? And Gray's like, oh, well, how about you just join the Gray? Like, if you show up, you're like, we've got power over death, dude. We can give you back anything you want, including your dead lover. And he's like, that's tempting. That's really tempting. So we cut back to World Command, and they're basically, Harry Sloan's just like, hey, remember how I nuked all those cities before? I want to do it again. And Khan's just telling him, like, this guy's crazy. Do we admit that this guy is crazy? And they're like, yeah, he's crazy, but like if it's going to work, it's going to work. We might have to do it. And we see that the fight is against Grundy still keeping up. They're still doing it. But then inside, we see that perhaps Green Lantern is actually giving into the Gray a little bit because he is cuddled up with his dead lover. And that's that. So it does feel like this is, the penultimate issue. Next issue, we'll get the rallying point to like, yeah, oh no, it's literally Avengers if you think about it. There's this whole thing that's threatening the world, and then they want to nuke the city. Like, it's just the third act of Avengers. But I like it. It's definitely, it's setting up the characters well. It's doing a good job in that. It's setting up these stakes. It's following the Justice League formula where their first arc is this world-threatening thing in order to prove themselves. And then probably it'll go down from there. Art-wise, it looks good. I definitely like the look of the Gray and Alan Scott just tumbling through it. Looks great. Beyond that, everything else is pretty stock standard overall. Nothing's too amazing throughout it. The Gray was definitely the standout point. So overall, I'd say I give it a 7.5. It's very good. Earth 2 is definitely one of the more interesting titles just because it's not beholden to status quo as much. It's able to change things up, and they're definitely taking full advantage of that. So I like it. Green Arrow number 13, written by Ann Nocenti, art by Freddie Williams II. This, I'm just gonna off the bat say the best positive about this book is I followed it. I understood what was going on, so there's that. Last time we had, in issue 12, we had Green Arrow was going to China because a guy named Feng wanted Oliver Queen's facial recognition software because he bought Queen's company. Queen wants the company back, so they're trying to make a deal, but he's not willing to give up the facial tech. Turns out the Feng's actually like a villain. He clipped Oliver's tie and then sicked his goons on him. Oliver went to prison for a while, and then there's a superhero in China named Susie Ming who's going to team up with Green Arrow. Okay, got it? Cool. Also, there were ghost demons summoned at the end of the issue. So, Green Arrow is fighting against Jin Fang, who's wearing some weird deadly razor masks, and there's also two goons named the Chow brothers who are attacking. Immediately, Green Arrow tries to repay the tie thing by chopping off their ponytails, which this group of 3 kids, who I guess are Jin Fang's children, are like just giving commentary to, like, ah ha ha ha, look how funny. It's so hilarious that he did that. And they just keep doing this, like, literally throughout the entirety of this fight. So Jin Fang then throws out a few masks. Green Arrow shoots at him, but it turns out, wouldn't you know, ghost demons. And it's apparently his parents, I guess. But regardless, they start attacking him, and he's like, okay, well, I'll just shoot them a bunch. And so he shoots them with arrows. The arrows do stick. Like, they're not actual full ghosts, but they don't kill him. They're just able to just go right through it. And so one of them starts going after Oliver. And then the other, like, for no reason, just stops. Like, as far as I can tell, I think he's using the arrows in order to grab a hold of the ghost and then pin it to the wall. Then the other one shows up, which, weirdly enough, doesn't look like a demon, just looks like a normal person, but then transforms into a demonic face. I don't get it, but regardless, they try to suck the soul out of Oliver, and that's when Susie Ming shows up, saves the day. They both make a breakaway for it and they just start talking about why China needs some wins. Like, that's basically what the conversation is about, where it's like, hey, look, China's prideful, China has ambitions, like, we just want to be like America, so why are you keeping us down, bro? And Oliver's like, I don't know, I guess I couldn't, like, they have a political talk about this while outrunning ghost demons. Basically, Suzy Ming says, hey, all right, look, we're not able to kill the ghost demons directly, however, we can put them in a grave and trick them to going back to dead. And he's like, all right, how do we do that? And they come up with this plan of there being some stone soldiers nearby, which I guess it will be enough to knock them down. Again, I don't get it, but regardless, the grandkids show up too. And we see that there's this entire plaza filled with these stone soldiers. And the ghost demons follow them there. And it's just a fight. It's like, I feel like they're trying to play it up like the horror movie scene fight, where it's like, oh no, he could be around any of these pillars. But like, they don't. It's just immediately they're attacked and they can't do much about it. They do their best to fight against these guys. Suzy Ming apparently has a ghost-killing sword, which makes you wonder why they didn't use that to begin with. But regardless, it doesn't actually kill the ghosts. It just dismembers them slightly. So at that point, they're like, okay, you see what I see? We gotta do this domino style. So they knock over one of the statues together because teamwork. Like, literally, Suzy Ming tries to do it herself. It doesn't work. And Green Arrow's like, let's do it together. And then it works. So they knock over the statue. It causes a domino effect. And it pins the ghost underneath / impales them. Which for some reason, them being impaled by the stone stuff was enough to actually kill them. But arrows and magic swords were not. And the kids are very upset that their grandma and grandpa are dead. So, yeah, regardless, they're just like, okay, why are those kids crying over these ghosts? And it's like, oh, I guess they thought it was like a video game. They didn't think it was real. It's like, what are we doing here? Whatever. So they make their way out of the thing. And also during the political commentary, I forgot to mention that Suzy Ming told Green Arrow that, hey, look, Oliver has to give Jin Fang the tech. Like, he's beholden, honor bound to that. However, he can't give him the tech because he would use it for evil. So he has to figure out that paradox. And we see that Oliver he's returned. He's like, all right, Jin Fang, here you go. Here's the technology. I know you will do many of the evil thing with this. And he's like, oh, you know it. But then we see that Suzy Ming is watching a video feed because Oliver set up a back door where anytime Jin Fang uses this, Suzy Ming will be able to like track it down. Will be able to track down Jin Fang and therefore stop him. So teamwork. So then Oliver meets up with Suzy as Oliver and says like, hey, Green Arrow told me you were pretty cool. And she's like, yeah, Green Arrow was super hot, unlike you. And he's like, yeah, all right, cool. So maybe one day you'll visit America and we can hang out. And she's like, no, I don't think so. But, you know, tell Green Arrow he still has my number. So Oliver hops back in the plane, flying back to Seattle. And I can't even remember the name of the dude who was accompanying him this whole time. But regardless, Suzy sends a picture of the crying grandkids one more time because we really had to have that. And then as they're approaching Seattle, they see some flying figures fighting over the skyline. So Green Arrow opens up the hatch and we see that it's Hawkman being attacked by Thanagarian soldiers. To be continued in the event Hawkman Wanted, which crosses over Hawkman, Deathstroke, and Green Arrow. Why? Screw you. So I meant it at the beginning when I said the best thing I could say about this book is I could follow it. I get it. I understood the series of events that happened. I don't understand why they happened still, and I definitely don't understand like how Jin Fang was just able to get away with this crap, but regardless, he did, I guess. I want to say like a 4.5. And that's also coming down to I'm not a huge fan of the art style here. Freddie Williams, I think he worked on Captain Atom. and it was very good. It very much stylistically like fit what it was. It doesn't work for this. It's just a bit too out there for something as street level as Green Arrow. So I want to give it a 4, but honestly, I'll bump it up to the 4.5. And that's simply because out of the entire Nocenti run up to this point, and I honestly think we might be at the end of it. I think we got one more arc, and then we got to switch over after that. But out of this entire run, at least I understood this issue, which I can't say much about any other issue she's written. So, hey, take your wins. World's Finest number 5, written by Paul Levitz, art by George Pérez, Jerry Ordway, and Wes Craig. This is essentially just a little epilogue capper issue before we get into the next arc. So we open up in Massachusetts in one of Karen's labs, and she's being blasted by a massive laser, saying, "Is that all you can do?" And Huntress is on the other end saying, like, "That's literally as much as your laser can do." Like, yeah, no, that is the cap. So if you want to test out how strong your powers truly are, you're going to need a better laser. And Karen's like, I mean, this is literally the best I got, so it's going to be an issue. I still feel strong, so I don't understand why Haku from last arc managed to hurt me. It genuinely doesn't make any sense. Also, something I just got to point out here is that repeatedly in this book, all of Karen's clothes get fried. Not completely. There's modesty to it in the most loosest sense of the word modesty. But like constantly she's having to get more clothes. And they lampshade that as well later on. They say like, "Hey, Karen, why do all your clothes get fried?" She's like, "I just know how to party." So anyway, this is the framing device of them saying like, yeah, you know, we got to find out like how to get back home, and also how to do all this, like what our powers truly are. Why didn't Huntress get affected by Haku's radiation? The world may never know. But then we just get two different stories, where the first is Karen basically saying, in looking for me on how to get back home, I invested in CERN, and they ran their particle accelerator, and I thought, hey, that'll have something to do with new dimensions. So she made out with one of the scientists there so that she could be literally right next to the tube as it was running. She uses her x-ray vision in order to see inside, and she's like, oh, this looks promising. This is something. And the dude she made out with like, why are you just staring at the, like, it's literally subatomic particles. You literally can't see them. You're just staring at a tube. She's like, shut up. You don't understand. Then a giant boom happens further down the line. She knocks out the guy briefly so she can use her superpowers. And as she looks at the boom, it's a portal, the same one that brought them into this world. And she's like, okay, this is promising, but I also see something on the other side, so gotta stop that. And out clanks this big mech machine. And she's like, okay, are you apocalyptic? Are you not? What's going on? And before anything can be said, it attacks her and starts attacking the subatomic, the particle accelerator. And so Karen jumps in the way, frying all of her clothes, of course, and takes the machine and flies it up through the ground, which is, you know, like in the Swiss Alps pretty much. So she just zooms up out of the ground, losing more clothes in the process. And then as she x-rays the mech, she sees a whole bunch of circuitry that's lighting up everywhere, and then all of a sudden it explodes. And she's like, well, that was weird. And then we get the lampshade hanging. I'm like, why do you always lose your clothes? And she's like, I'm physical like that. So then we switch over. Huntress is like, man, I don't get out as much as you do, but I still get out. And then we see back in Boston, there is a march for not exactly women's rights, but just a protest against, like, you know, the sort of sexual assault and stuff like that. It's just a respect sort of protest. And we see a bunch of women marching, but then there's also a sniper nearby loading up his gun. And Hunter shows up in her civilian saying like, oh, hey, nice protest. I'll join in along. And she gets talking to one of the people there. And Huntress looks up as she hears like the crack of a gunshot. Everyone else thinks it's thunder. Apparently no one was injured, but she's like, oh, that's a gunshot. I gotta go take care of that before someone is injured. So she puts on her outfit, looks around, tries to find where the sniper is, sees the glint of his scope, and makes her way up there. But it is like on top of a very tall building, so it's going to take her a minute or two to get up there. And in the time it takes her to get up there, another shot is fired, and she hears a scream down below, and she's like, all right, got to get in there now. So she gets in, sees this guy on the sniper platform, and he sees her, immediately flips around like, hey, don't come at me or I'll shoot. She just throws one of her little throwing knives to knock the gun out of his hand and kicks him in the face. And the guy starts to talk like, you don't understand, and she's like, I genuinely don't care. Like, shut up. And he's like, but I don't care. I genuinely don't want to hear it. He's like, okay. So he's put in the cop car. Apparently nobody was injured on the second go around because the protest is still ongoing. I don't know why someone screamed. But regardless, Huntress makes her way back to the protest and they march off on their own. And then we get back to the framing device where Karen's like, you do know there's going to be more people like that, right? And she's like, yeah, just got to take the small victories where you can. And she's like, it's different than what I do. It's either solve the problem or get out of the way. And he's like, all right, well, to each their own. And then they fly off together into the night. And that's it. That's the issue. I liked it. It was a solid little frame device to say how both of them, their own things they're doing. Karen is definitely more desperate to get back to her homeworld, whereas I'm always blanking on her name. Karen is Helena. That's the one. So Helena is far more accepting of her current world and just trying to do good things where she can. Trying to be that sort of, I don't want to say optimistic, but just getting things done as she would in her own world, where Karen is a lot more self-centered otherwise. So I like the framing. I like the characters. I got to say the art style definitely jumps around a little bit. It doesn't feel... It does have a jump once it gets to the Huntress story. That one does feel significantly different. But between the Power Girl and the framing device, it feels pretty much the same. George Pérez and Jerry Ordway, very similar. Wes Craig is a little bit different. Maybe it's just the inks, but overall it flows. I like the feel of it. It isn't anything amazing, but it is just a nice solid issue, so I'll give it a 7. Definitely looking forward to seeing where we go from here for the World's Finest, because they really haven't set up any future plots besides Get Home. So interesting to see at what point they might pivot on that or make some progress. Either way, I'm interested to see it. GI Combat number 5, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Howard Chaykin. This is the Haunted Tank. I don't know either, but I get a feel for it here. So we open up in the Red Room, which is an unknown area filled with known dangers. There's a tank in there and some ghostly voice saying, "Find him now." And then all of a sudden the tank just disappears in a puff of smoke. So then we go to somewhere else, some sort of farmy town, and a little boy is trying to get the baseball that's rolled under the porch of this man named Jeb Stewart. And the house is all broken down. It looks horrible. But as the kid approaches, he's immediately like, nope, I bail. So he just runs off. And then we go inside Jeb's house and we see Jeb, who is shirtless, with an American flag wrapped around his neck, wearing a cowboy hat, holding a saber, saying, "Look out, Krauts, I'm coming to town in my ghost machine." And then we see him standing on a tank, but like made out of parts. Like it's, the way a kid puts together a fort, he put together a tank. So, yeah, then he collapses a little bit. He's like, geez, where'd I put my goggles? I'm going to need them if I fight the Krauts. And he knocks over some pictures off his wall, one of which is of his grandson named Scotty. And he's like, I don't want this. I don't want this for you. You're going to be great. You're going to be great in the military, Scotty. Unlike me, you're the one thing I didn't screw up. So then cutting to Michigan on a main highway, the tank's just going. It's just driving down the Michigan highway, crushing cop cars. And everyone's like, what do we do? all of a sudden the feds show up and they're like, okay, this is a black ops situation. No eyes on this at all. We're going to go ahead and we're going to drop some heavy artillery on it. But then the tank disappears in the heavy artillery, and they're like, where'd it go? Where did it? And the tank reappears on top of the helicopter, crashing it down to the ground. So then it takes some side shots, knocks out another helicopter, and as the helicopter lands, some special agents come out of it, full gear, and they all start firing on the tank. Tank doesn't move, and they manage to get up to it and strap it down with some high tensile wires. The tank then takes all of its rivets and blasts them out at high speeds at everybody, and then disappears again. And then they're like, okay, we need to talk to Colonel Trevor. So at this point we cut back to Jeb, who he hears this high-pitched screech noise, and he holds his head and he sees that his ears are bleeding. He's like, oh, I guess someone's looking for me. So we cut to Colonel Trevor, who he's like, I want everything we know about this old man now. And he gets a report, and it turns out he was a World War II vet, I believe, because he says he's 98 years old, so that would fit at least. He does a 4-mile run 4 times a week, and Colonel Trevor recognizes that as a thing that physicians would tell soldiers coming back home to do when they got back. And so he's like, okay, I don't think that Jeb knows this tank. He didn't cause this tank to show up, but the tank's definitely showing up for him. So we got to go get him now. So he goes in there and he's going to bring a couple little extra things if he needs them. So we see Jeb is putting tissues in his ears, trying to mop up the blood. And he's like, everyone in my family, they've always called crazy. The crazy Stewarts, they called us. Well, I'm hoping that my grandson Scotty isn't anything like that. But, I got to feel like there's a reason for it. There's some reason that I have all this going on. And as he's thinking so, the special agents bust in through his roof. And it's like, we know you're here, Stewart. We got a heat signature. And so they started coming after him. And he's just like, well, use the front door, you bastards. He's like, sorry, war's over, Stewart. You can take down your Lego set and your caveman drawings. You're coming with us. And before he can do anything, the tank shows up on his front lawn. It somehow electrocutes the special agents. And then he comes out and he's like, oh, I missed you too, buddy. Aw. And we hear the ghostly voice saying, the line of blood must not be broken. Save him. So Jeb goes in and he's like, oh, guess we got an important mission. Guess I'll head out with you now. And they call in a mag slab in order to take care of it, or at least Trevor does. And Jeb's listening on the comms because he picked one up off the agent. He's like, oh, you guys aren't going to be securing nothing. I'm out of here. And I don't know what a mag slab is, but thanks for the update. So at that point, he gets in the tank, and we see this jet flying overhead that has what the mag slab is, which is just a magnetic pole, literally a tractor beam that he uses to lift up the haunted tank. And as Trevor has a shot on Jeb in order to take him out, because obviously he is a threat, Jeb just looks out of the top of the tank, gives a salute, says, up yours, Blondie, and then disappears with the tank. And he's gone. So then we get the last page here, which is in Afghanistan. His grandson is being held prisoner. He's about to be executed. He's got a gun to the back of his head. He says, I'm Sergeant Scott Stewart, United States Army, 8147. And then all of a sudden, the tank appears, knocks out the terrorists, and says, hey, your great-grandpa's here, kid. Let's get you home. And that's that. So we got a 98-year-old in a haunted tank who, I guess that the Stewart bloodline has to be able to proceed, and I guess Scott has not had his kid yet, so therefore he must be saved by the haunted tank. It's given a little bit of mystery, while at the same point keeping it light and fun. Up yours, Blondie, and then just disappearing in a tank. I like that. That's hilarious. So overall, I really do enjoy this issue. It's such a wild concept. I know that Haunted Tank existed before. This was a deep pull, but why? What would be the reason to bring it back? That's my thing. Like, you have to have an actual good idea for a story here. And I genuinely do think that they have something interesting going on here with the idea of this tank that's able to do just all this crazy stuff and having to recognize this bloodline of the Stuarts and trying to save that. It's got an interesting concept to it, so I'm definitely intrigued, and of course I'm going to check out how the rest of the Haunted Tank series continues. Stormwatch number 13, written by Peter Milligan, art by Will Conrad. This is a new arc and kind of go a more horror aspect with it. So we open up in London in a house called the Mallory House, where a woman is currently murdering her husband while another man, a child, hard to say, is drawing things on the wall saying that I have to keep drawing, or else I'll say the naughty words, and I'm not allowed to say the naughty words. So then we get a breakdown of what in the hell's going on. Mallory House is apparently a house in London that is literally just like the worst. Like, people who designed the building went crazy. There have been, currently living there are a whole bunch of like serial killers and otherwise horrible people. It says here on the 8th floor was well-mannered animal torturers. 6th floor lives the giggling garroter. 2nd floor is Miles Morgan, who keeps his organs, the organs of his latest victims, in the freezer. And then down in the basement, no one goes there because there was an incident 2 years ago and it's super creepy. But the reason that all this is happening, that they establish, is that way, way down, deep in the foundation, deep in the clay of the earth, is Etrigan, the demon, who has been kept here for centuries, eons even. And he dreams of hell, but he's unable to escape. And he's been making a psychic connection with this kid who's saying, I gotta keep drawing or else I'll say the naughty words. So he's making a psychic connection with that kid in order to free himself. So then we pick up nearby where Apollo and Midnighter, both in their civilians, Lucas and, blank on the name of the other guy, Andrew, they are out at a bar, and they're just... Apollo's trying to relax. He's like, hey, we finally got a night off from Stormwatch. Let's go ahead. Let's have some fun. And Midnighter can't help but notice that everyone in the bar is really on edge. Like, they're all just itching for a fight. And he calls out, like, those guys are about to fight. She's going to join in. Then that guy's going to do something. And Apollo's like, dude, we are here to relax. Unless, of course, we're not here to relax. Did you come here for, like, Stormwatch business? And we see the fight that Midnighter was predicting immediately break out, and Apollo's like, okay, good job, yeah, well done. So they walk out of the bar, and Midnighter explains, like, here's the thing, I used to work in this area before Stormwatch. There's something wrong with this area. Like, everyone is just itching to kill each other, and, like, I don't know why. Like, even you have your people who are just, you know, itty-bitty little muggers or whatever, and they turn into full serial killers when they get here. Something's going on. So he's like, all right, well, should we call Stormwatch? Is this a thing for them? And it's like, oh, what's that? Normal people getting in a fight in London? Yeah, no, I can hear Engineer being sarcastic already. Let's just handle this ourselves. No, and I apologize for misleading you. I just wasn't sure if you'd come, if you knew that this was kind of related to work. So then we get 2 pages of just like exposition, I guess. The main Stormwatch crew, we have Jack Hawksmoor, Jenny, Quantum, and the Engineer. Quantum's trying to make sense of the giant horn that they got all the way back in issue 1. They still have no clue what's going on with it. And then they're just asking, like, why are we here? Like, what are we doing at Stormwatch? Why are you here, Jack? And then Engineer comes in and says, like, hey, has anyone seen Apollo and Midnighter? And he's like, oh, I guess they bailed. Like, they're probably down on Earth or whatever. We'll find them eventually. And then we cut over to Antarctica, where Harry and Emma, the Harry who defected and took Emma hostage, they're saying, like, oh, we have formed a love. We are now together forever because you trust in me and I trust in you. And it's like, yes, Harry, I do. I believe in your cause. We're going to fool the Shadow Lords and rule Stormwatch. And he's like, yes, I will. And as soon as I do that, we will be reunited. And then, like, as he's fading away, he's like, you treacherous little minx. And she's like, Harry, can you hear me? Are you going to take the Shadow Lords? You son of a bitch. So obviously neither of them trust each other. They're just playing the game, I guess. And then we go back to the issue as a whole. So they see a mob running down a street, going after, like, attacking people. Midnighter pulls out his costume and is just like, Apollo's like, you brought your costume with you? And he's like, yeah, does that really surprise you? And he's like, no, I guess it doesn't. Anyway, Midnighter goes off, kicks some ass, and then Apollo just, like, flares up his energy and has his costume underneath his normal clothes. And he's like, oh, so you're calling me out for bringing my costume. You brought yours. And he's like, I thought you would have liked to have some fun with it later. Wink, wink. So then we see the fights continuing on. Apollo just causes a solar flare to, like, basically blind everybody, get them to stop fighting long enough in order to see what's going on. But then they make their way over to Mallory House, which at this point is, like, shaking and crumbling, and there are people jumping out the windows. And it's like, hey, maybe this is the source of all the issues. And they go in, they hear the voice of the kid saying, mustn't say the naughty words, mustn't say the... But he says, like, I've used up all my inks, I've used up all my crowns, I literally am out of blood in order to keep on scrawling. I have to say the words now. And that's when Midnighter and Apollo bust in, and they're like, hey, guy, what's going on? And he's like, too late, I really gotta say the words. And he says, concealed within the world of man, release the demon Etrigan. Because, rhyming. And at that point, a big magical shockwave goes off. We see Madame Xanadu freaking out, like, oh, geez, something's happening. The Spectre's like, uh-oh. Constantine wakes up drunk at a bar. He's like, whatever just woke me up, I don't like it. And then we see the entire building start to collapse as people outside the building are also chanting the same thing, saying, release the demon Etrigan. And as the building collapses, Midnighter sees a shadowy form of the demon, and he stands up and he does his rhyming, and he's like, okay, it's still confused, it's still a little bit tired, maybe I could take it out. And Midnighter goes for a punch, and Etrigan just swats him away, still rhyming. But then at the very end, as Apollo's trying to get Midnighter up, Etrigan's like, alright, screw the rhyming, I'm done with it. Oh my god, I am going to kill so many people. And that's where we leave off, is part 1. I mean, it sure as hell set it up, I'll give it that. Honestly, it reminded me a bit of Sandman in a lot of ways. Like, it just felt like that story where it's like, oh, there's this deep lore or something like that, and then this house that's cursed and blah, blah, blah. It had a lot of vibes of that going on, of just some random kid who was selected, like, but I liked it. I really did enjoy this issue as a whole. I'd say my only issue with it is that maybe they felt like, okay, we might have new readers hopping on. Maybe they felt something else. But there was that 4 pages in the middle that were just exposition. We're just like, and in case anybody forgot, here are the other members of the team. And here's the threat of Harry and Emma. Okay, we got it. We good. Back to the story. It just felt unnecessary. But everything else I really did enjoy. It was a great setup for a start of what feels like a very big sort of thing of Etrigan has been released on the world again. How will we deal with it as Stormwatch? So, and also it's hinting the link that we learned in the 0 issue between the Demon Knights and Stormwatch itself. It's going to be interesting to see how that repairs. So overall, this issue gets a 7.5. Really did enjoy it. Art is a little stock standard, heavier on the inks than normal, but still very good throughout. I don't have any qualms with that, save for the odd face every once in a while. But hey, what are you going to do? So 7.5, really do enjoy it. Dial H number 5, written by China Miéville, art by Mateus Santolucci. This is, as far as I can tell, wrapping up the Abyss Void plot thing going on. So we open up with Nelson, Manteau, and Squid all facing down against Ex Nihilo. And Ex Nihilo is the only one who's transformed into something via the dial. And is trying to call Abyss to help her out. However, Abyss isn't showing up. Abyss is off doing other things. So Squid launches a acid attack at Ex Nihilo while Manteau and Nelson make their escape. And Nilo makes an attack on Squid, which basically just decimates his body. Like, he's got 100 holes in him now, and there's no way he's going to be able to do anything. So Nelson has the dial, and he needs Mateus to fix it. They go back to her place and start putting it together, whatever they can. And at this point, Nelson's like, we never actually like formally introduced each other. Hi, I'm Nelson Gent. And we find out that Mateus' name is Roxy Hodder. So Roxy gives her backstory of how back in the 60s she was she was going for a PhD in literally telephone technology. And she lived in a commune which was just discussing these massively huge ideas of like, it says, take Fuller's Zonohedra as a model for space-time is the one thing that we've got here. So not your typical hippy-dippy stuff. Anyway, one day she stumbles across the dial and realizes that's something special and proceeds to become Mateus. So Nelson's keeping an eye on the news, seeing if anything comes up, and they see that Abyss has appeared downtown, but also that Squid is dead. Like, he's dead in an alley, and there's nothing that they can do. So at this point, Nilo, whose name is Wald, but I'm just going to keep going with Nilo. Nilo has dialed again and got one that Mateus was familiar with. It occasionally happens that there are repeats, and this one is extremely powerful, named Harbinger. It's like Harbinger, but with hair. So Wald goes up and talks to Abyss and is like, hey, why'd you leave me alone? I thought we're in this together. And Abyss just is like, I'm hungry. He uses a lot more weird words than that, but that's the basic gist of it. And so Nilo tries controlling it using her null magic. And he's too powerful. He can't be controlled with the null magic anymore. He's out to just feed on as much stuff as there is. So at this point, Mateus has put back together the dial. It's ready to go, and it's ready to... He's like, we got to get something spectacular in order to fight Abyss. Something like a really strong one. And Nelson's like, no, it's my dial. I'll do it. And she's like, you are nowhere near qualified enough to do this. I've been doing this for years. And he's like, all right, fine. Let's just toss a coin. So as Roxy goes and gets a coin, Nelson just takes the dial and dials it. And immediately Roxy's like, yeah, no, we're dead. So cut back to the fight. Nilo's trying to hold back Abyss, trying to control it. There's like tanks in the area. Soldiers are trying to get all people evacuated. And Roxy shows up and is like, okay, the dial's not fixed. Your form isn't stable. And you got a horrible hero. We shouldn't be doing this. And Nelson's just like, get the Squid. He'll find out what to do. This is a job for Cock-a-Hoop, which is literally a rooster head and wings on a hula hoop that just rolls into battle. Yep. So it comes in, he attacks Nilo with like a sonic cock-a-doodle-doo, and then proceeds to make her dizzy by hooping around her. But then he starts to like falter. He turns back into Nelson for a second. And then we see up above military helicopters who arrived to attack Abyss, and they fire off missiles at it, but it just eats them, absorbs them, and then also proceeds to absorb the helicopters. Then it looks up at the moon, and we find out that it's literally eating the light coming off of the moon. So at this point, there's also a bunch of smaller voids around, like tinier ones, bigger, smaller than Abyss, and Cock-a-Hoop is able to dizzy them up and get them all confused. And so Squid comes up with the plan of, okay, if Cock-a-Hoop can get them dizzy and disoriented, and Ex-Nihilo can boost their power with her null magic, they can redirect them back at Abyss, and the voids will eat the void that is Abyss. It is a void consuming a void. So they pass up the plan, they say, all right, let's do this, and they start redirecting all of the smaller voids into Abyss, which does work. Nelson, throughout it, he loses his abilities, the dial conks out, but it is still just enough that Abyss is unable to fight back, and all of his smaller voids devour him. And Squid points out that when a void eats something, it leaves behind nothing. But when a void eats nothing, it leaves behind something. So Abyss starts turning into a giant colossus of stone. And as he's crumbling up, he's like, what's happening? And Nilo's like, this is death. You're dying. And as he's about to crumble up, his face is the last thing to do so. And out from the face of Abyss comes another dialer, another person with a dial. And it zooms out very quickly, going after ex-Nilo, and is just changing heroes like super rapidly. Nilo's not able to keep up, and she's immediately knocked down out of the sky, and the dialer steals the dial that Nilo had right off her body, thus turning her back into her human form as she plummets down to Earth and is killed instantly. The dialer then, just before Abyss's face finally closes up, manages to get back into the Abyss and is sealed off for good. So that was the shadow on the line that they've been hearing about. This person who's been around, has been in the dial network, and they can feel it, but they don't know who it is. So soldiers come in, they see everything that happened. The dial is destroyed, like the core of it was taken out and taken by the dialer. So Nelson and Roxy just make their way back home, and they're like, okay, well, we're not done yet. There's still a lot of craziness going on. Whatever the hell that was that took out Nilo, we got to find out that. And regardless, we still have one dial left. And they hold up the dial that Nelson was using. And it's like, and we got to figure out what happens when he shows back up. So that's the end of that. I understood this last issue. I feel that this would read a lot better on a reread of knowing each of these characters, knowing like, okay, Nilo is this particular one. You got Squid, Walls, the same as that. Like knowing where each character is, you understand what those earlier issues are saying even, because it gets really confusing with all the names being thrown around, especially when you have 100 different heroes as well. It just gets very lost in the shuffle. But having now finished it, having now hit the end of the arc, I believe it's good. It's a very solid story. I never thought that it wasn't. It was just confusing to get through the first time around. So overall, I'd say that this issue, it was a creative ending. It did some good characterization. It brought in a whole new big mystery that I am definitely intrigued into. So overall, I got to give this one like an 8.5. It's very well done. Highly respectable work by both the art and the writing. And I really can't fault it beyond that. So Dial H continues to do very well by me. And that's it. That is all the comics that came out from DC Comics this October 3rd, 2012. And my mouth is really starting to give me hell right now, so I'm just going to wrap this up as quickly as I possibly can. Next week, we have 14 comics to go through, and they are the number 13 issues of Batman, Batman and Robin, Batgirl, Superboy, Green Lantern Corps, Deathstroke, Grifters, Suicide Squad, Legion Lost, Demon Knights, and Frankenstein. Additionally, we have the number 5 issue of Ravagers, and the number 1 issue, following up after the 0th issues last month, of Team 7 and Phantom Stranger. Now that being said, there are events. There are a lot of events going on, so let me just walk through those real quick. We have Death of the Family starting in the core Batman book with a tie-in happening in Batgirl. We have the Rise of the Third Army continuing in Green Lantern Corps. We have Rot World continuing as a tie-in to Frankenstein. And then there is Team 7 and Demon Knights, which both ostensibly are part of a very loose crossover called the Black Diamond Probability. Now I say very loose crossover because I literally cannot find anything promoting this crossover. Like, eventually some of these titles will have little banners saying Black Diamond Probability, but not all of them. And only in like later issues. But according to all the articles I found, these 2 issues are what started off. So I'm going to say that they're part of the event. But it is, again, such a loose event that I barely even consider it a blip on the radar. But that makes 6 different issues, all parts of events, so we have our work cut out for us. But until then, Twitter, @DC Comics Podcast, Patreon, Mild Fuzz TV, all one word. Social security number, 813... You almost got me there. You almost got me there, but nope. My social security number is not that. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, listening, doing however it is you do with this. If you could interact with it at all, give a like, give a comment. I don't care. I'm not going to force you to do that. But until next time, always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.